Hi, we're Nia and Marianne from Seren Health Coaching. We are metabolic health coaches who are passionate about good metabolic health for everyone. We also love to chat about all things health and to share as much information as we can with people who want to make changes to their lifestyle but aren't quite sure where to start. We're going to release a new episode every Friday where we talk about a different aspect of health. So do subscribe and let us know what you think. We'd also love to know what you're interested in too. So if there's something that you'd like us to have a chat about, do send us a message and we'll do our best to cover it soon. Hello, Marianne.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So what are we talking about this week?
Okay, I wanted to talk about time restricted eating, so shorter eating windows, which is obviously terribly topical and terribly popular at the moment. And when I started to look at it, I mean, we've always been fair proponents of shortening your eating window. But
Yeah,
depending where you start, of course. So, if you were a caveman, by the way, you would have no problem shortening your eating window.
especially in
Um,
the winter.
Yeah, if you'd grown up in my era,
Yeah.
you probably wouldn't have thought about it either because we were given, honestly, 3 cooked meals a day, and it was pretty regimented, and people
Mm.
really didn't eat between the last meal at night. So this is a more, contemporary phenomena in a way, this whole
Yeah. I
talk
think
about
maybe
TRE.
the last 5 years it's become more popular.
Oh,
Five,
yeah,
6 years.
yeah, 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 and what is it exactly? So when you think about it, of course, people ate when it was light, and when the dark came, they went to bed and they didn't eat. So,
Mm.
um, I mean,
Oh,
this is nothing new, is it? But
no.
industrialization, as you can see, has changed our world so much. And so, what I fell into when I started to look at the evidence for TRE, which we've always been very excited about for various physiological and behavioral reasons, because
Yeah.
it's definitely beneficial for people who are grazing a lot and also eating late at night and early in the morning. So all
Mm.
that's good, not nothing to take away from that. But what I fell into was circadian rhythms, which is sort of the same, but is sort of not. And I got very interested. You know what I'm like. I went off on a little sidetrack here, but
Yeah.
actually they terribly related. Okay.
Okay. So basically what you're saying is this is something that we have been doing forever.
Yeah.
It's not a new thing, but we've kind of packaged it, repackaged it, and resold it in the last 5 years or so as something very exciting.
Exactly.
Um, but actually, it's sort of been a difference because of the way that we choose to live now. So we live in an industrialized
Yeah.
environment where we work 24/7.
A lot of shift
Yeah.
workers, people working late at night. There's since the internet arrived, people
Mm.
have taken their work home. They're available 24/7. So this all plays a part. And in the end, the TRE taking me to circadian rhythm was sort of an apt take because
Yeah.
that's sort of what we're talking about.
Okay.
So you and I have recently, quite by chance, and that's what made me think about it. We've talked a little bit about the fact that we were very wholesalely sold on
TRE-ish.
the whole idea.
Yeah.
And I would still stand by the fact that for me, particularly, TRE started to make me think about stopping eating earlier in the day and maybe eating a bit later in the morning. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are definite benefits, by the way, to smaller eating windows. It's
Hmm.
it's how far those benefits go and
Go.
what exactly the benefits are that became more interesting to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think I'm in agreement with that. So
Yeah.
I completely agree that shortening your eating window per se, so not eating right before you go to bed and all of that
Yeah.
malarkey, and thinking about when you're going to eat during the day is really important. But I've become less enthusiastic about delaying breaking your fast because you have to submit to the
Okay.
clock. So if you're saying to yourself, "Well, I won't eat till 11 o'clock," but actually by
Yes.
9:30 you're absolutely ravenous,
Then
I
yeah,
feel that you should eat
yeah,
then. And then
exactly.
there are
Yeah,
people who take that to quite extreme places,
yeah,
like 5-day fasts or one meal a
yeah,
day.
yeah,
And then we also know, anecdotally, don't we, that people who don't have the best metabolic health aren't actually that hungry in the morning.
yeah. So that's an interesting phenomena, and I always thought in a way, you want to play into that. So if you're not very hungry in the morning, and that's generally the easiest way to shorten your eating window for most people,
Yeah.
is to delay their first meal of the day. And the reason they aren't hungry, we thought, was very easy, because in terms of your physiology, you haven't basically woken up your glucose spiking insulin levels.
Mm.
And until you wake them up, you tend, and anecdotally, I think that's very true for lots of people. So
Mm.
they don't feel hungry. They live on coffee for quite a long time in the morning. They're very happy to do that. When they have their first meal, they'll often tell you that they get hungry afterwards. So that's quite
Mm.
interesting. So
Mm.
you've woken up that sort of insulin, and you know the whole insulin resistance story, which we obviously know very well. And I think that's one part of this story. The other
Mm.
part was about the cleanup that happens in your body when you're talking about circadian rhythms and the rest period that you were sort
So
of designed for. And
yeah,
I
so
think
autophagy, this
that's a
is
yeah. So this is a bit of a different story, and the evidence isn't so easy to find.
no.
Although although to say that nobody cleans up unless they fast is obviously it can't be right either, because for most people in our world, we almost never fasted beyond probably 16 hours. Maybe some of us have done 24. Maybe you've done that before a test or something.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, we don't fast for more than probably 12 to 14 hours. So there's no chance that we can't be doing some metabolic cleanup, because, I mean, we'd all fall over, wouldn't we, if we weren't doing metabolic cleanups?
Well, yeah, so we know how important it is, isn't it, that part of it to repair cells and to regenerate
Right.
new cells, and
Okay.
none of us would be able to do that if we didn't fast for those periods of
No.
time, and I certainly do not fast for 24 hours.
So
So
so I started listening to a recent podcast with the absolute father of modern intermittent fasting, called Professor Sachin Panda,
mm,
and he's really interesting. And he's spent his entire long career looking at circadian rhythms, really. And this is really what we're talking about. And a great analogy I loved, which listeners might love, is he did a lot of his studies on mice,
mm,
because it's an awful lot easier to do any sort of nutritional studies on mice, because you can put
yep,
them in different boxes. He used genetically similar mice, and then he fed the one box had 24/7 access to high carb, high fat food, and he was equating that to the sort of Western diet. And the other half only had access of the same diet for 8 hours a day. And guess what? The 24-hour access mice grew obese and got
yep,
fatty livers and other metabolic problems. And the other lot, even though they were eating a similar diet but only in 8 hours, did much better metabolically. So this
okay,
was an interesting and very simple little
study,
story
yeah,
about the benefits. You can't really argue with it, right? But,
no,
but what I really loved was his analogy about us all going to this. So our metabolism's like a block of offices, right?
okay,
And so all the workers are going about
working,
their day in this big office block. And eventually everyone goes home and the cleaners come in. And
hmm,
unless the workers go home, the cleaners can't get in. So
yeah,
the fact is, when we live our sort of lives with shift work, with late, with all the industrialized work sort of problems,
mm,
where work has expanded hugely into the time, you can understand that that block, that business block has got given the cleaners less time. And so the analogy is that um, the cleaning isn't quite as good. And
because there's
when you
people in
get
the
back to
way.
work the next morning and your office block hasn't been cleaned and everything isn't organized, you become less productive the next day. And
Mm,
he equates things like jet lag, which is quite easy to measure. So there's
mm,
jet lag and there's shift workers, and there's definite evidence that it's very beneficial to work by day and sleep by night, by the way.
mm,
And we sort of know that. So we're not going to argue with that science. The science that I got more interested in was how we worked out um, about, they call it autophagy.
Yeah.
It's a funny
So
word.
this is the bit that I find
Yeah,
difficult because
yeah,
people
yeah,
quote to
yeah.
me, "Well, I need to fast for 16/8 because I need to get my body into autophagy." And I think, well, ah,
Hmm.
how
Yes,
much evidence
and
is there really of that? And can we do we
I
know that
think it's
mice get into autophagy?
yeah.
All of this stuff, like, because we've not. It's
No,
hard, isn't
I
it?
don't think we've got very good data or evidence. So a lot of anecdotal data. So the big Zoe study recently, I can't remember what it was called, the study, but they looked at asking people. So self-reporting in nutrition is
Ooh,
always a bit of a minefield because you're relying on people to tell you that they eat between certain hours, and in reality, people will say, and I've done this myself, that I eat at 7, so I only eat between breakfast at say 9 and I finish eating at 7. Well, I don't actually finish eating at 7 because that's when I
no.
start my dinner. And
Yeah,
if you're talking about digestion and the digestive tract, by the way, makes a great analogy about cars on the digestive tract, on a motorway. And then
mm,
the fact is that the road workers can't get in until you've stopped eating.
yeah,
Um,
of course,
so
yeah.
if you're eating at 10 o'clock at night, you're still digesting at 1 in the morning, which doesn't
So
leave a lot of
we have
time for the
time.
cleanup.
Yeah,
So, so I love that, and it really makes me think. But also, as you're on your way to bed and you're doing the washing up, you forget about the little cheese and biscuit you just nicked out the fridge, or the bit of orange you had after dinner, and that happened to be at 9 o'clock. So I think self-reporting about time restricted eating is actually quite
quite tricky.
hazardous. The
Yeah,
good the good bit that did come out of the anecdotal study was that people said if they did were become aware that they wanted to shorten that eating window, that they felt more energetic. I mean, we could argue that's a placebo effect, but they felt more energetic, and that also was useful for managing their appetite. So
mm,
I think, and that's another interesting phenomenon. We've always talked about not snacking between meals for the same physiological benefit, that when you eat a meal and stop between those meals, you are actually less likely to get hungry than if you snack, because your insulin levels tend to go up to cope with the snack, and it then takes a while to sink. That's the idea, and that you
mm,
actually get hungrier. So I think that still stands,
yeah,
but I'm not quite as sold on the fact that you won't clean up if you're not fasting for a
a
certain
number of hours.
length of time.
Okay, right.
That's
So
that's much more interesting. And did you know that circadian rhythms affect every cell in your body? And this wasn't known originally. Um,
right. So what we're saying is, hang on just a minute, let's just go back a bit because so we there are gains to be had by fasting for 12 hours, right?
yeah,
So you're saying that
definitely.
we
Yeah,
should definitely not snack all the time, not graze all the time, and we
yeah,
should have a
yeah,
smaller eating window. Um, but that once we extend that eating window, it's not as easy to extrapolate that data to say that there are huge gains
exactly.
from extending it. And that is where we are lacking in data to suggest.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
also, anecdotally, you're saying, well, it can't possibly be that we all need to fast for longer periods of time because we'd never be able to repair ourselves. We'd never be able to get the
yeah,
benefits of what this autophagy is.
exactly.
Right. So,
So there are
interesting
two there
then.
are two parts to it. One, there are two bits of physiology too, and some people would argue with both of this. But the fact is, the appetite management and the energy levels which come from managing your blood sugar better
Mm,
is a different argument to the autophagy, which is self cleanup. Basically, autophagy
yes.
means
Yeah,
self
yeah, yeah.
cleanup.
Yeah.
Um, and my argument would be that you are still getting some cleanup as long as you're using that circadian rhythm to live by. And the cleanup is definitely impaired when you are flying around the world continually or shift working. And we sort of know that because people are more at risk for metabolic disorders when they
Yeah.
disrupt that circadian rhythm. But it's actually to do with the circadian rhythm. And that's what I got interested in.
Okay.
And I think what I didn't know and what I learnt was that every bit of your body is built with a circadian rhythm. So
Yeah.
it's not only so So you might slow down, your heart muscle will slow down as you sleep because you tend to change tack.
Yeah.
But other things come in. So there's the cleaners, it
Yes.
doesn't mean that you just slow down completely overnight. You're still using lots of different, and that's why disrupted sleep is not great for all sorts of bits of you, actually.
Mm.
And we know that people with disrupted or very deprived of sleep will have a trickier time managing their blood sugar the next day, for instance. So this is
Mm.
a really complicated system, but what we're saying is, if you're metabolically healthy and you're sleeping and eating in a 12-hour window, you'll be doing absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Are there
Yeah.
benefits to getting a longer eating window? Well, that will depend also on your metabolic health, I think. So I
Mm.
think that there's a few complicated things, like if you're not hungry in the morning doesn't necessarily mean you're doing fine. And I've sort of learned that personally, that
Yeah.
that might mean that your metabolism's actually quite sluggish. And I know from looking at people like endurance sports people, that they literally wake up and have to eat because they have used so much more energy
Energy.
overnight,
Yeah.
just because they've got a huge ratio of muscle
Muscle.
to fat mass, and also the day before they would have made huge demands on their energy
Mm.
systems. So I think it's a complicated system, but I loved listening to the circadian stuff.
Yeah.
And the other
So
really,
when we put this into practice then, this
yeah,
because this is the important part about
yeah,
putting it into practice. So for people who are metabolically healthy, such
yeah,
as you and me, we
yeah,
can go with 12 hours
I
because
think so. Yeah,
there really isn't any additional benefit to going any longer. But say
yeah.
you were metabolically unhealthy, you had pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, blah, 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 and you'd not done anything yet, it might be more beneficial for you to start with a
I
slightly
think so.
longer
Yeah,
fasting
because
window,
your insulin levels would drop further down the longer you fasted. That would be a plus because you
right?
would resensitize, hopefully, and become less insulin resistant. That would be one way of looking at
Reason.
it. The
Yeah.
other way is that you might need more cleanup,
Mm.
and giving
Yes.
yourself more cleanup
Time to
time
clean up.
probably bestows benefits. What I don't have is the actual data on that.
Yeah.
Um, but
So
I
it's
do
sort
think
of
it's all very linked.
yeah, so in actual fact, it's like one of those
Yeah,
interesting things that we
yeah,
say people get fixated on that I must fast for 16 hours or
yes,
20 hours or
yes.
however long, but
Yeah,
actually this is actually for a short period of time to
yeah,
kind of almost reset your body. It's like pressing a
yeah,
big reset button.
yeah,
And then once you get to the point where you are actually metabolically healthy, where you do use your energy efficiently, your fuel efficiently, and your body doesn't need as much time to do that cleanup, you can drop back to the 12 hours. And that's where I think a lot of people get unstuck because the rigidity of the I'm going to fast for this long
yeah,
works for them
yeah,
initially. And of course it does because there is something to work on, but it's not necessarily something that they then rigidly have to stick to for the rest of their life. And once they become metabolically more able or more efficient, actually then it's about listening to the cues of your body. And if you are hungry, eating and not worrying about what the clock
and I
says.
think anecdotally, that's what's made us think about it recently, is that you're obviously much younger than me and metabolically very healthy. And when we wore continuous glucose monitors, both of us, we definitely had very different patterns, which was
Mm,
interesting in itself. But the fact is that if you're metabolically healthy and your weight is, sitting in a very nice, easy place to keep, that the fact is 12-hour windows look like you've conferred most of the benefits and don't need to be rigid. And the other thing is that I think listening to your appetite is pretty useful in that
mm.
event. So if you're getting hungrier earlier, why are you withholding food? What is the benefit really for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think for other people with metabolic disorders, there may be added benefits
Mm.
to resensitizing your system and using a slightly longer
Fasting time.
fasting period. But
Yeah.
but as I say, I don't actually have, and I think it's really hard to get that evidence
Yeah,
actually.
because you can do it to mice in a way.
Yeah,
But you can't
but
really
can you? Yeah,
humans, and humans will
yeah.
have all these other things going on.
So difficult to get it off humans unless you actually locked people up and did some
Yeah, ethically, that's not
unethical things.
that's not going to fly.
No, I'm not sort of going there. So
Okay.
that's where I went down this hole, and I don't know if that makes any sense other than to say it's interesting. It's about circadian rhythms. It's
Mm,
about resting your metabolism. It's about the cleanup that happens, and that happens to you anyway. That if you stay up till 3 in the morning, you feel terrible the next morning,
yes.
that has repercussions for all sorts of bits of you. It's not
Yeah.
just that you're tired.
So
That's the
let's
way I got to.
yeah, and I think that's really important. So I think that we therefore come to the conclusion that this is incredibly important information. It's
Yeah,
not new information, but we need to be careful to how much we
yeah,
rigidly stick to it. So the
exactly.
important things I've got from this conversation are that obviously with circadian rhythm, sleep is really important, which I could have told you beforehand, but not
Yeah,
for these
yeah, yeah.
reasons. So
We knew
actually,
that. Yeah,
we knew that, but this is
yeah.
another thing. Like we have to stop skimping on our sleep. We have to prioritize getting our
Mm,
sleep. The eating window that we go for is personal.
yeah,
So if you're metabolically healthy and a 12-hour window suits you, great. If you're metabolically less healthy and therefore you want to go for a bit longer, 16 hours is great. But don't feel like that's going to have to be your thing forever. Once you improve your metabolic health, you can reduce that. And there's very
yeah.
little benefit that we can find of going past those 16 hours.
And maybe on a future podcast we talk about exactly what autophagy is and what we know about it. But I suspect this is new science, and that we don't know all there is to know about a lot of this. But it would be an interesting podcast to
Yeah,
say, what are we talking about when we're talking about the cleanup? Exactly,
yeah.
what are we talking
Okay.
about? Okay,
And then we've
cool.
also got don't eat too late at night.
Yeah, if you
Make sure
can.
you're eating
Yeah.
well.
Try not to snack after dinner if you can. I
Yeah,
mean, that's a lovely principle. I think it works really well for everybody,
yeah,
unless you have special needs like you're breastfeeding a new baby, or,
yeah.
even in
That's a
pregnancy,
different.
there
Yeah,
might be, and small children, of course, need to snack. So there might be other extenuating circumstances.
yeah,
But in general, we're saying don't snack between meals if you can help it. Don't snack late at night. Try to eat 3 hours before you go to bed, because then when you go to sleep, the whole cleanup starts rather than eating just before you go to bed, which the
and
then
then
cleanup
waiting
can't
3 hours.
start till 1 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. All
absolutely.
very simple, really. What are we talking about? We're complicating this terribly. It's very simple.
It's all really very simple, isn't it? But this is the thing. This is why all of these things catch on, though, because they say the latest thing you have to
Yeah.
do is this, that, and the other, and actually, it's not even the
I
way it
suppose
works.
the message was if you eat in a smaller eating window, you'll get thinner. I do think that was the message, and I
Oh,
think
it was. Yeah,
that's what comes out of these messages is they don't say actually we've been doing this forever and it's a part of how we live with day and night on the earth. They say this is a
mm,
new phenomenon. We've just found this magic thing where if you eat in a smaller eating window, you're going to look really cool. So that's my dispute with all these messages,
golly.
really.
They were like we're good little mythbusters.
Maybe we should call this podcast
The
the
Mythbusters.
Mythbusters. Yes, I think that's what we're trying to do, aren't we? We're trying to say, let's unpick things, and we're not good at unpicking everything, but I think just questioning things and
Yeah.
starting people thinking is not a bad idea.
Don't believe the hype. Love it. Right. I'll
Okay,
see you next week.
cool. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.